What is the current? Believers say it is conscious energy, energy that is focused on healing. The concept makes sense to Dr. Amit Goswami, a professor of physics at the University of Oregon. He is one of several renegade scientists who are exploring spiritual answers to scientific puzzles, and vice versa. Dr. Goswami believes that quantum physics may explain how spirits could interact with the material world, how consciousness might live on after the body dies, and how that disembodied consciousness could be channeled.
In the quantum model, things are not things. What I mean is that the objects that we portray in our world are not determined things. Instead, they are possibilities of consciousness to choose from.
The universe is made up of billions of particles. Dr. Goswami believes that when we see an object, such as a house or a tree, it is only because we choose to see the particles grouped in that particular way.
Conscious choice, consciousness choosing out of its own possibilities. In this way, there is no exchange of signal or exchange of energy involved.
In traditional physics, there is always a physical exchange of energy. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Given these parameters, it is hard to understand how the non-physical could affect the physical. If one trades those rules for the quantum model that Dr. Goswami espouses, that consciousness always determines what we see, distinctions between the non-physical and the physical quickly break down.
The idea that comes in here is that consciousness is taking advantage of expertise available elsewhere than John of God's brain. So where is this expertise? And here comes the quantum idea of soul. Quantum idea of the soul is that soul can exist as character of people that have died before.
Professor Gary Schwartz, a neuroscientist at the University of Arizona, is a specialist in the afterlife. He has received government funding for his research.
Our energy and information extends into space, and it travels more or less at the speed of light. And so consequently, the notion of things happening over distances which we call, quote, non-local, which is really more extended, the fact that these kinds of extended interactions can take place, that's the rule and not the exception. I mean, that's why cell phones work. That's why satellite technology works. So once we understand that this is biophysically possible, and then we understand that consciousness is part of this, it becomes completely plausible that the constraints of distance are no longer what we think they were. We have done research, for example, in our laboratory where we've been able to show that people who practice Reiki can affect the cellular growth of E. coli bacteria in a test tube. So we're actually showing that here's a case of conscious intention using a Japanese form of healing is actually affecting cellular function in a controlled context. Cultures such as in South America, first of all, they're much more open to the idea of a spiritual reality and a continuum between the physical world and the spiritual world. And so consequently, they're going to be more open to entertaining this and also actualizing it.
It may be difficult to imagine a world in which everything we see exists because of conscious energy. Professor Schwartz believes an open mind is essential.
We used to think that the Earth was flat, and then we discovered it was round. We used to think that the sun revolved around us, and then we later discovered that we revolved around the sun. We used to think that objects were mostly solid, and now we know from quantum physics they're mostly empty space. So what the history science teaches us is that things that we once thought were impossible could ultimately still be investigated, and we could change our mind or change our paradigms as a function of what the data reveal.
That belief plays a very major role in all spiritual healing. I mean, even in what conventional is called placebo, belief has a very major effect. Placebo healing is seldom permanent. It's a temporary effect that takes place. So John of God obviously starts with something like placebo, namely belief helps. but something more concrete is taking place.